Angie Griffiths of Princeton Office Supplies, taking advantage of our all-request afternoon. Hey, we're going to have more requests right after the hour. Taking a look at the weather, we've got another bright, beautiful, sunny day. Temperatures are expected to reach the 40s. We're on target right now, 19 degrees, and we got real high UV levels. So if you're going out in the sunshine, don't forget your sunscreen. If you're just driving on the long haul, grease up that cup. You're listening to KMOF, the country favorite station, and we're going to be back in just a moment with some great country favorites, including one from Kathy Mattea about the big rigs and flowers.
This driver doesn't know it yet, but he's about to experience his worst nightmare come true. He's been a long-haul driver for 4 years, and he understands all too well the pressures that go with the job. He knows the value of time and has figured out exactly how much he needs to get from point A to point B. Trouble is, he doesn't know the highways and terrain in this part of the country, and he doesn't respect steep downgrades. We can all relate to that awful moment, that point in time when we realize we've lost control. It's terrifying, and it can be deadly. We've all heard about downhill runaways. What we just saw in this video was the result of several mistakes or errors in judgment. That's what most runaways are. Not one ruptured airline or worn lining, but a series of events which lead to loss of control.
This is about like a keg of dynamite, to be honest, you know. Unless you have an idea what you're doing there, you can get yourself in trouble pretty fast.
Anything can happen, it can go anywhere. And you're in control of a unit that the amount of devastation that you can cause with that by doing something inadequately is just extreme. And that's what a person has to understand.
This video is about the difference between professional and unprofessional driving. We're going to look at that runaway again, identify the events that led up to it, and discuss ways we could have prevented it from happening in the first place. Many of you are probably thinking that brake failure was the obvious cause of the crash. But in fact, most runaways are caused by driving too fast for the grade and brakes being out of adjustment. That means that our driver may have made one of his biggest mistakes before he even got on the road that day. Did he do a thorough pre-trip inspection? Over the last 20 years, the design of your vehicle has changed. Improved aerodynamics, reduced rolling resistance, and improvements to engine performance mean that your truck is now more fuel efficient. But, in contrast, your brake system hasn't changed much at all. Modern trucks require roughly twice as much brake power to descend steep downgrades. Too much power to rely solely on your foundation brakes. It's now more important than ever to check brake adjustment. And that involves getting out a pry bar and physically checking the push rod travel at each brake chamber. Let's look at why this is particularly important before you're about to descend a steep grade. Let's say your vehicle is equipped with Type 30 brake chambers that have a maximum stroke of 2 1/2 inches. You've just checked the adjustment of the brakes and found that there's 1 inch of travel. This means that the push rod had to extend out of the brake chamber by 1 inch before the S-shaped cam rotated enough to force the lining against the inner surface of the drum. If you find it necessary to apply more than 10 psi application to hold the speed of the truck on a steep grade, the foundation brakes will be unable to dissipate the heat being generated. This will further reduce reserve stroke as application pressure is increased to offset the negative effects of a rise in brake temperatures. A heavy application of, say, 80 psi will extend the push rod another inch. This now reduces reserve stroke to ½ an inch. To compensate for a rise in brake temperatures, the push rod will need to extend outward a further ¼ an inch each time that the drum expands approximately 20 thousandths of an inch, or when as little as 10 thousandths of an inch of lining is worn off. Let's freeze operations at this point. The push plate is bottomed out in the brake chamber and you're now without brakes. If you still haven't reached the bottom of the grade, you won't be able to stop. You won't even be able to slow down. You'll be driving a runaway. When you're about to drive a steep downgrade, you can't afford to pass an opportunity to check the adjustment of your brakes. Common Type 30 brake chambers should allow no more than ½ an inch of pushrod travel when checked with a pry bar. Your brakes should be adjusted to ensure their best performance on steep grades. Earlier in the video, we saw our driver pull into a brake check area and firmly apply his brakes. He thought he'd checked his brakes, even though he never got out of his truck. He thought he'd done the right thing. But in reality, he'd missed an important opportunity to prevent the runaway. It's not possible to check your brakes without physically pulling on each slack adjuster. Even self-adjusting slack adjusters need to be checked and, if necessary, adjusted. Check with a mechanic or your manufacturer for the correct procedure.
Guys that come out of driving school and they do a good job teaching them, but they give them no experience, and now they're out there, you know, it's like flying a 172 Cessna and all of a sudden you put them into a 747.
Ask questions and just pay attention, and whenever you see any brake checks or anything like that, make sure you use them and do your pre-trip, because if not, you get yourself into trouble.
Our driver didn't know what to expect when he hit that steep grade, even though he had all the information he needed. A professional driver would have ensured that he had information about the road ahead, the severity of the grade, the location of runaway lanes, the location of sharp curves. A professional driver would use this information to plan his descent. The key to being a professional driver is planning. When a driver sees this sign, he should be determining what he needs to do to maintain this speed or lower. Four-way flashers are just common sense. Obviously, you don't want four-wheelers running into the back of your vehicle. In British Columbia, signs with dashed borders provide information intended specifically for truck drivers.
Like, you know, I've been running in Alberta too, and it's just flat, you know. So when you come to BC, there's a lot of rough terrains here.
It's different. You know, there's lots of hills and the ditches are pretty deep.
You, the driver, make the decision about how you'll maintain a safe descent speed. Truck advisory signs are there to guide you. Clearly, it's not a good idea to start out too fast, build up speed, and then expect to be able to stop. We've already seen that the combination of steep grades and rising brake temperatures mean that you can't rely on your foundation brakes to control your descent. There's only one way to avoid a runaway situation. Determine a manageable descent speed. This is achieved by determining a speed that will enable you to descend a steep grade without relying on the use of the service brakes.
That's why they have runaway lanes for guys that use their brakes.
Let's pick up at the point where our driver first became aware that he couldn't slow the truck down. This was when he realized that increasing application pressure to the service brakes had virtually no effect on slowing the speed of the vehicle. He sees the sign advising him of the approaching runaway lane, thinks about it, but decides he's going to try and ride it out. A lot of guys worry about using runaway lanes. They figure if they've lost control of the vehicle on the highway, then they've got no hope on a narrow, steep ascent. The sad thing is, they're right. That's why you've got to use a runaway lane before you lose control. This driver is about to prove that it's possible to use an ascension lane without running off the end or rolling backwards and jackknifing. The driver doesn't have to go all the way to the top. He only needs to go far enough to bring the vehicle to a stop. To secure the vehicle, the driver can apply his parking brakes, put the truck in first gear, and turn the engine off. There are a tremendous number of myths surrounding the use of arrestor beds, and some serious concerns. Some guys worry that the load will shift forward and possibly enter the cab compartment. The driver might go through the windshield, the truck might roll over, or that the kingpin will let go. Obviously, there has been little movement in the load, and driver and cargo emerged safe and sound.
I think probably the biggest surprise and the best feeling was I never felt like I'd lost control.
Use the runaway lanes. Don't get her going too fast before you try it.
Arrestor beds are safe, providing you steer straight into them. The vehicle will jackknife if you try to straddle the bed. Same goes if you try to steer your truck out of the bed before you've come to a complete stop. The thing to remember about runaway lanes is that they're a final preventive measure, a last resort if you like. They're there for drivers to use before they completely lose control on the highway.
If you care about yourself, then you're going to do your pre-trip. You're going to go and do and take care of your equipment. You're the #1 guy in there that's going to get hurt, barring anybody else getting hurt.
Check your brakes when you come to the top of the hill. Make everything's working properly and don't go too fast.
Observe your road signs for sure. When they say 20 kilometers, they mean 20 kilometers, not 90.
In some ways, your responsibilities as a driver are very similar to those of an airline pilot. Just like an airline pilot, it's ultimately your responsibility to make sure that your vehicle is fit for travel. Like an airline pilot, you have valuable equipment and cargo, a schedule, and a plan to see it through. That's where the comparison ends, unfortunately. There's no control tower out there, only you. Your gauges don't calculate a safe descent speed for steep grades. They also don't measure pushrod travel, check brake temperature, nor monitor drum stretch nor lining fade. Let's take a moment and review. Perform thorough daily pre-trip inspections. Confirm brakes are fully adjusted before driving down steep grades. Record information from traffic signs. Select descent speeds that will enable you to travel down steep grades without having to rely on the continuous application or intermittent snubbing of service brakes. Know the location of runaway lanes. Make the decision to use a runaway lane before your vehicle exceeds a manageable speed. Your own knowledge and experience is all you have to prevent runaways, so use it. And if you need information, make sure you get it. The obligation is on you to make the right decisions. Take those extra few minutes to check your truck and obtain information about the road ahead, because that's the time you can't afford to lose. Checking, planning, and maintaining control are the difference between professional and unprofessional driving, and the difference between runaways and making the grade.